Welcome to Jim's Reinvention Revolution podcast, the show that explores reinvention in the digital age as it relates to career, creativity, and technology. Stay tuned for interviews with professionals, entrepreneurs, and creatives that have reimagined success and are making a pivot. If you'd like to listen to the entire back catalog, visit jimreinventionrevolution.com for instant access. And now, here's your host, Jim.
Hi everybody, this is Jim. Welcome to episode 5 of Jim's Reinvention Revolution podcast. And I'm sitting here with Maria Falbo, and today we're talking university life, education, the right education, and finding your tribe. So I'm excited to talk to Maria today because I don't see her that often, so I'm talking to her face-to-face down here in Durham, North Carolina. So Maria, welcome to the revolution.
Thanks for having me, Jim.
Excellent. Well, great that you're here. As we get started here, I have one question for you that I want to remember this before I forget. What was the name of the place we went? What was it, yesterday? God, I don't know when I even got in. It's like been a blur since I got here. We went to get donuts and biscuits, right, at this place?
Yes,
what was it called?
Yes, and the only reason you're asking me this
Why?
is so that I'll say the name and you can make fun of my accent.
No. Hey, that's a double bonus. That's a bonus. That's not even the reason why I was going to ask you.
It's called Rise.
Yeah, say it again.
Rise.
Rise. And that's like in normal English, that would be rise, right?
Yes.
Oh, I see. Okay. So, Maria, where are you from? Just for the people listening around the world, what kind of accent is this that you have?
West Virginia.
West Virginia.
Yeah.
Woo. Hey, and believe it or not, both my parents are from West Virginia. Actually, Cowan, West Virginia, many years ago. But I was born up in Cleveland, so I don't have that accent. But where's your family from, West Virginia?
Between Beckley and Charleston, along the Kanawha River.
Oh, okay. Cool.
A town called Montgomery.
Yeah.
Hansford.
Yeah, beautiful country in there, right?
Yep.
Yeah, almost heaven, West Virginia.
Almost.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah.
Well, anyways, this place was called Rise, and this is in Durham, North Carolina, and we had great donuts and biscuits, and I guess that's what you eat when you're in Durham, North Carolina. You have to have some biscuits.
There's a bunch of stuff to eat.
Close to the south here, so.
It's getting to be a foodie town.
Right. So it was really good. Anyways, thanks for reminding me what it was called. And no, I didn't ask you that just to hear your accent again. I was really wondering what the name it was. But anyways, hey, let's get into this. So one of the things we've been talking about is I know Maria from college. We went to the same college together. We went to Xavier, and we studied physics together. And so, one of the things that's interesting is Maria took this path through grad school. Once we graduated, she went on and got a graduate degree, PhD, and she'll tell you about that in a second, and lived this university life for a while. And I kind of went into industry. So she's got a different background and different experience or, thoughts about life because of that. So what were you doing? Tell folks what you were studying, like physics-wise. What was your interest in doing your PhD, and then how you got into university life, or what you thought about it, why you were doing it?
Well, let's see. I liked physics, which is why I still like physics, which is why I was doing it. And I was studying an area of theoretical physics that had to do with figuring out some mathematics related to quantizing gravity.
Quantizing gravity?
Yeah, which people still haven't done yet, haven't been successful at doing. Anyway, my dad was a mathematician, and I think that's partly responsible for...
Your dad was a mathematician?
Yeah.
I don't think I ever knew that.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So is that where you think you got your technical kind of, prowess from?
It definitely helped being pretty good at math and, I have 5 sisters and 2 of them are mathematicians, so I think he had an influence definitely. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so I really liked the math and physics. Once you're a physicist, you can't be anything else. It doesn't matter what you do. It's like physics is everything. It's always there.
I never thought of it that way. I was a physics major as well. I've always considered myself as a scientist, sort of my approach to life. I want to learn about how things work and why they work the way they work. But I'm not kind of an engineer or some other kind of technical sort of majors that are out there, like IT or those kind of other things. more of a scientist at heart. Although physics kind of leads you into engineering and all these other aspects of the sciences.
But that's what, in the beginning it was called natural philosophy, the philosophy of nature.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I didn't know that either.
Works, so.
That's it. I think that describes me and you probably, because we are sort of philosophers and in life, I guess.
I don't know if I go that far.
Well, I know what we talk about when we're not podcasting, so. But cool. Okay, so you're in school and you're going through and studying physics, and then you decide to go on to grad school and continue.
Right. So I finished the master's degree and then the PhD, and my dissertation was in this area of theoretical physics that had to do with quantizing gravity. And after that, I started looking for postdocs where you go and do more research in your area of interest. And I was also married at the time, and he was also a physicist, and finding jobs for two people like that was kind of challenging. So long story short, I ended up in academia on a tenure track teaching position that also involved writing grants and continuing to do research, but I was at a place that was more interested in involving undergraduates in research, which was sort of hard to do in theoretical physics. So my interests...
Just because theoretical physics, it's pretty graduate level, postgraduate level stuff, right? And dealing with the undergrads at that point, let's say, is trickier. They don't have quite enough education or experience to really have an impact or communicate the right way, right? Okay.
Yeah, so I started looking at applications of what I had been doing that could involve undergraduates, and ended up working on an experiment at the Stanford Linear Accelerator Center, and then also doing a fellowship at NASA Goddard Space Flight Center, and involved students in both of those things while I was still teaching a fairly full course load.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're busy and really digging in terms of what being a professor means, or how to handle research and all this stuff, right?
Right. Yeah.
Because that's obviously a different role of once you graduate, it's all completely different. You're sort of thrown out there and, okay, go survive.
Right. Yeah. And I went the teaching route not because so much I wanted to teach, but I wanted to continue doing physics.
Mm-hmm. Right. And that was a way to keep you more pure in the discipline.
Right.
Versus working for industry and obviously theoretical physics. I don't know what industries would employ more theoreticians versus practitioners or lab-oriented physicists.
I think there were a lot of people who did things along the lines of what I did, who ended up in finance, economics.
Oh, really? That's interesting. Okay.
And then IT also, because it was fairly computer intensive, lots of the calculations.
I see. From the data analysis sort of aspects, the skills transferred over.
Right, or even solving equations on computers.
Oh, I see. So. Right. Okay. Right. The real higher end stuff. I got it. Neat. So you're doing this university life, and there's some pros and some cons to it, I guess. I imagine, because you're not there anymore. So
right.
So right. How did your experience? What about the experience excited you, and what about it said, I'm not sure this is a good fit, or time to move on, or time to try something different?
So I enjoyed most when I would have these experiences talking with students or other faculty members, sort of like when we get together and talk about stuff.
Right. Solve all the world's problems.
That's right. Yeah, but surrounding sort of physics and learning and the way things work. So that was the great part of being an academician. But it was only a small part, and that's why I left. The bigger part of being an academician felt like, a lot of rule enforcing and satisfying certain requirements. The application for tenure and promotion is a huge ordeal, and I decided to leave once I was tenured. I went through the ordeal, and it pretty much made it clear
that
So you became
tenured, actually.
Right, I was tenured, and then I decided...
So after all of that...
After all that...
And you did it, and you were like, I can do this, and you got the stamp of approval, and
decided
you're like, whatever.
Yeah.
That's very interesting, you know.
Something else. Yeah.
Okay. So I think that's so interesting, sort of experientially to find out. So there's some parallels there to I think the corporate world, or any large organization that's needs to be. I think it demands to be hierarchical and organized in a certain way because you have to execute and manage lots of people, and there's different expectations, and politics come in the fray, and public relations, and all those kinds of things. Obviously, at a university, it's got this history and this much more overt, maybe, hierarchy because you have undergrads, grads, and administration, and there's all these little political nuances that when you're just passionate about your subject, maybe that's not obviously a big turn on.
Right, and that's pretty much what it was. I when I said
because you weren't interested in being like university president, for example.
No, I wasn't. I wasn't ever interested in being an administrator.
Mm-hmm.
I was interested in being a physicist.
Right. So. Okay. So I get that. So what do you do? So you come to this crossroads, and what do you do?
Well, so my thinking was maybe a different institutional environment. So I didn't. I left that institution, went to another, taught there for a while, and started thinking about creativity, that I needed something that, where I spent most of my work day doing what I felt like was creative stuff. Mm-hmm. And so from, when I first started teaching, I had also been taking classes, and most of my interests were in the arts, visual arts. So things like drawing and painting and...
So this started... So this is interesting. So we unravel the layers of Maria here. I didn't mention at the start that she's really an incredible artist. So visual artist, painting and maybe sculpture and some other things. You'll correct me if I'm wrong here, but... and we'll get to the end. She's got a great website put together, et cetera. We'll talk about, but this connection between science and technology, art is very interesting. As you folks might know, that I play saxophone. I'm very into music, and the science, engineering, and art part is all connected. In my mind, always has been. And I think
mine too, and I'm always surprised when other people are, think it's just so weird. Right,
exactly. Like, no, it's not weird. The people that are doing it really know that it is all connected. It really is to me. But my question for you was going to be, did you get into art later on after you graduated, or were you doing art like in high school?
So if I think about it, I was making and creating things out of stuff.
Okay.
From the time I was a little kid, growing up in poverty.
Okay.
Pretty much, I think.
Maybe forced your creativity.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. There are things that you want that you can't afford to buy and don't have, and so you figure out how to make the closest approximation. So I was doing that, and putting ideas down on paper, sketching things before the one thing I remember that I made, and I went through several iterations and never got it right. I really wanted flip-flops.
Oh, really?
I really wanted flip-flops.
You couldn't just go to the store and buy flip-flops?
I couldn't just go to the store and buy flip-flops.
Wait, people don't even wear shoes in West Virginia, isn't that right? Why are you going to wear flip-flops? I'm just kidding. That's a West Virginia joke. I can say that because my family's from West Virginia. But, some of it's true, though.
And because I'm sitting far away enough that I can't get it. Yeah, so I really wanted a pair of flip-flops. So I started looking at, the material, how big to make the soles, what to make the soles out of. I, went through different thicknesses and types of cardboard and fabric and fabric-covered cardboard and fabric-covered wood, and then, making the part that held your foot on the sole, the string part, figuring out how to get it not to pull through whatever the sole was made out of. Right. And so, I spent an entire summer.
How old were you at this point?
I was probably 8 or 9.
8 or 9? Oh, that's kind of funny, yeah.
So just figuring out how to do that. And it just occupied my whole summer. Like, I would wear a pair until, that didn't work. And then,
that's interesting. So maybe a precursor, like back then you were like a maker,
right,
before people even coined that term.
Yeah. And always recording things on paper. I think I had, I know my mom painted. I don't know if she actually ever did it in front of us, but she was a pretty creative person. Managing a 9-person family on a shoestring budget, she had to be pretty creative.
Yeah, right. Right.
But anyway, so
so you start taking classes once you already have a PhD in physics, which is wild to even think about. Pretty heavy duty stuff there, but you're like, oh, I was not satisfied. I think I'll just start taking smart classes now.
Well, it was one of the other great things about being an academician is you have access to all these facilities and people at a university, and so I took advantage of what I could, all the studios and the professors, and so I did it as kind of a another thing to feed my interest.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so where we were at, remind me. Sorry.
Oh yeah, so then after I had talking about this evolution from university to doing other things, so I had been thinking about, well, what could I do to make money that would feed the creative side and the technical side, and so I thought about a lot of things and thought architecture might work. Mm-hmm. So I found out what I needed to do to apply to architecture school. I put together a portfolio, which was required for application. I applied to a few schools that had something called a master's in architecture for people who already had degrees in something else.
I see.
And I ended up going to the University of Charlotte, University of North Carolina, Charlotte. Mm-hmm. And that was supposed to be a 3-year program, but after a year I realized that, after working for 10 years or something before that I wasn't ready to go back to square one.
Right.
So I would have graduated after that 3 years and been, making less than.
Right. Hard to go backwards sometimes.
Yeah. So
especially when you're at this high prestigious level.
Yeah, and then so it wasn't only going backwards financially, but after architecture school, you don't start out doing the stuff I wanted to do.
Right.
It's many years before you get to do, if you get to do that kind of thing. And so I started rethinking all that.
I see.
Because I didn't want to spend more years getting to the place. I'd already spent 10 years trying to get to the place where I could be, satisfied in my soul with what I was doing.
Right. And so I think this is very interesting because a lot of people go through this when they're thinking, oh my gosh, I'm realizing I'm not in the right spot. I need to make a change. I'm not sure how to do it. I'm searching because I think there's a theme here with you, at least over the last few years of searching. Before finding somehow like the right spot, the right fit, and when you find it, it feels good. And I want to talk a little bit about that when we get there. We still have some more ground to cover here in terms of trying things. But I think it's instructive to just hear your voice about how this sort of searching and yearning to figure out how to fill up your soul with the right stuff, and not settling for you could have stayed at the university, work 10 more years, be close to retirement, whatever, or have a bigger nest egg or whatever, but you knew that hey, this life is fairly short, and tomorrow's never promised really, so I think it behooves you. And now kind of with all the digital tools that are available with us these days, it's easier than ever to kind of experiment, try things, figure things out, find the right education that you really need. That when you're younger, you're driven towards a particular type of education, I think, and maybe schools and the environment kind of drives you there. But now it's very different time. So let's go back to you realize oh, this is years ahead of me. It's not exactly where I want. It's helping because it's more creative and artistic endeavor.
Yeah, and I have to say that year in architecture school was one of the best years of my life. Yeah. was just so creatively fulfilling. And a lot of that had to do with the people that I was in school with.
I got you. So you got
so
like
the environment,
reinvigorated, right?
Yeah, the environment was fantastic.
Cool. So what was next?
So what was next? Because I realized that this wasn't going to work, I went back to what I knew, which was teaching.
Okay.
And continued to do that. Stopped searching for a while because it's tiring.
Sure.
Searching is tiring.
Right. Takes a lot of emotional energy to get it together and make decisions and take these risks.
Right.
You know, it's all about
the risk taking is very stressful.
Right. I mean, yeah, you got to earn some money, some real cash to keep everything flowing. You know, but also the emotional risk of willing to look stupid or willing to be a fish out of water.
Exactly.
You know, willing to just dive in and try something new. You know, it's really about we were talking earlier about the stories you tell yourself, the stories in your head. You know, if you're sitting there and thinking like, oh, this is something I can't do, instead of feeling you can't do it, in a way, you're actually telling yourself that you actually can't do it. It's about the story that's running in your head, you know. But if you tell yourself, yes, it's risky, but I can do it, you know, you might just make a different decision, you know. So that's interesting that you still got to the point, you know, you needed a break. Obviously, you needed some cash flow, so you go back and teach for a while. But you still were like, I still got to figure this out.
Yeah. I'm
still trying to do something different. This is not where I need to stay.
Yeah, and I was still really thinking that, you know, maybe the academic life was what I was supposed to do.
Right.
And I've gone back to it several times and then been each time a little more convinced that it's not what I need to do.
Right. You're like, you remember all of a sudden, like, oh, right, this is why I left, right?
Yeah.
You know, your brain sort of forgets after a while, right?
Right. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So, and this is when I think I started to get kind of reconnected to you, because we graduated and kind of went our separate ways, and then I think I got reconnected through Facebook. I think, right?
Yeah.
And this is years ago, maybe 6, 7, 8 years ago. By now, you know, the power of technology here, I guess.
Yeah.
So yeah, I knew you were hopping around from like school to school. You were teaching at like a local university, and then I think you taught some high school stuff. You were teaching physics and different things.
The high school teaching was a lot more, I have to say, fun than university teaching. But yeah, I missed the higher level technical part.
Right.
Yeah, so I've taught at 4-year liberal arts university, public, private, high school, community college, informal education.
Right. So I think we're getting
explored it all.
Right. Right. Well, that's good. So I mean, at this point, I think you're probably starting to figure out like, okay, this is really not the right path. I got to figure this out.
Right.
And somehow you get into, well, you've always been biking, I guess, all along. Doing art, doing biking. I mean, you have so many wild interests that you do at such a high level, which is crazy. You know, that's why the term Miss Amazing always comes to my mind when I think about Maria. It's my little insider term that I call her. If you see her out there in real life and call her Miss Amazing,
and it makes me blush.
I'm going to know that, or she's going to know that you listen to this show. So I would love that to happen to some random person come up to you and say, "Hey, Miss Amazing." That would be pretty wild. But
it makes me uncomfortable, very uncomfortable, because it's just not the way I think about things.
So, but you were doing art. You got into that because you needed to kind of feed your soul,
right?
And you started that, and the architecture probably enhanced that, right?
It did. I took some great, just awesome classes, and like I said, my classmates were some of them just amazing talent and skill as artists. So I learned a lot.
Right.
And there, and then so let's see. After the teaching things, I worked at Target.
Yeah.
I did.
So this is a woman with a PhD in physics. Okay.
Getting up at 4 in the morning,
right,
to get to work at 4:30. Yeah, I don't do much in the morning. And,
to go work as just a retail associate at Target?
They call it a signing specialist. So all those little signs on the shelves at Target and all the displays.
So you're like a merchandiser.
Right, pretty much. Yeah.
Okay, so someone got into retail. That's very interesting. Yeah. So I think this is hilarious, but I think it's one of the greatest things that you can do is to never be too proud to try different things. Because I think this led to some very interesting things for you. And I've done this myself. Like I've quit in jobs before, and right in the middle of my career, I quit a job and started working at Borders and started selling CDs in the music department just because I needed that same fix of I have to be around music, I have to be around things I like, and I was burnt out with the big corporate job, and it was great. You meet different people who think differently, and it's a great way to like interrupt your normal thinking, your normal thought process, or your normal expectation. And, a lot of times I know other folks, professionals that I've known, even some other close friends, that, I don't know if it's pride or if it's just, I don't know, shame might be too strong a word, but, or they've lived in their community a long time and they feel like they just can't be seen in a different light for some reason, or maybe because they have families and kids. And they're maybe like a little bit of a fear inside them to try these different things, to really be, I guess, humble in a way, and just say, hey, there's so much to learn in every little job or every little thing that you try.
Right. I think part of the, you mentioned shame or pride. I think, if you're not there are a lot of people who define themselves by what they do for work.
Right.
And if you don't have that, then it's an open question.
Right.
Right. Then you can't put somebody in a box. Oh, you're a professor.
Right. Right.
Then people think they know what you are, but like I told you the other day, this searching thing is not strange to me, and people who really know me might understand that.
Right.
That having a lot of interests and interested in them at doing them at maybe a higher level than just a passing hobby sort of thing that's
right. I think kind of sort of the easy interpretation of this is like, well, young lady, you have to make a decision. You don't know what you want to do in life. You got to pick a path and go for it. But I've had this experience of many people call me young lady. No, I'm just kidding. People have looked at me this way, and I've always done many different things. I've always done music at a very high level. I've always done science, technology, or business at high levels. Like anything I want to kind of tackle, I'd like to be good at it, and I'd like to work with other people that are good at it. And some people that don't have these diverse interests, it's confusing to them, or maybe I don't know if it threatens them or something, but it's hard for them to wrap their head around it.
Right.
And I think this is part of probably why. Maybe one of the reasons why you felt a little uncomfortable, or the world of the university was not quite the right fit, because people really do specifically put you in this box because you are the professor. Everyone really looks at you this way, and that means you do certain things and you don't do other things, kind of, probably, right? Yeah. And I felt that for myself in the corporate world. It's like, as soon as you're doing this particular job, it's hard to be promoted into that other department or to take this thing on because people are skeptical that you can change or be like them or go from the technical side into the business side, like from engineering to marketing, which I made this switch when I was working. And, half the people just didn't believe I could do it, and I thought I was the wrong guy for the job and all these kinds of things. It's very interesting, people's behavior or psychology, And it's like, you should never forget that, no one is born into this life being an expert at anything.
Right.
Okay? And there's always the first time that they're doing it. And just because you haven't done it before doesn't mean you can't be good at it, even if it's a complete left turn,
Right.
And it's like I'm just diving into a complete new field. And if you're good at one field, and if you learn how to educate yourself, and you have this process of training and education that you know how to do this, you'll be able to grasp that and dig into it quickly. And it's what it sounds like you've been able to do. So you go to Target and you get into this retail world, right?
Right.
And so what did this kind of spin off into?
So then finally, after Target, I did more teaching, and then after I decided that was enough teaching, once again,
right.
I was looking for something to do that was just purely based on an interest. Call it a hobby if you want to, but one of my passions, and one of my passions was cycling.
Right.
And so I just decided to get a job at a bike shop, and worked for this shop as a part-time salesperson. So I had that little bit of retail experience.
Right.
And,
did that help you get the job, or help you feel comfortable kind of going after that? Or?
I think it helped get the job, but I think what really helped get the job was all my experience cycling, that I could talk about it when I went in for the interview, that I had been on long rides. I knew what it was like to bonk. I knew what it was like to have a flat tire. I knew what it was like to ride a bike that didn't fit.
And explain what bonking is again.
Oh,
I'm not a very experienced cyclist, and I hope she's talking about cycling. But what is bonking?
Yeah, so it's when you run out of energy. Like you didn't eat enough, or you're not eating enough.
Oh, see, I didn't even know that term. Okay, good.
Or, sometimes those energy drinks that you put in your bottles that are on the bike, you maybe just put water and didn't have enough,
okay, got it.
Electrolytes.
To the pro cyclists out there, they know exactly what she's talking about. But okay.
Yeah, and so then it's just like your brain's telling your muscles to do stuff, but your muscles are not listening. They're disconnected.
I see.
So that's
right. That fatigue, real fatigue.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the guy I interviewed with, he was younger and from a totally different. The guys in the bike industry are they are of a specific type, I think, and I hope I'm not offending anybody out there. But this guy, he had total respect once we started talking about bikes.
Right.
And a lot of people
probably have some preconceived notion
about what an
older. You're like a small, tiny.
I'm doing this when I'm 40 years old.
Coming in here wanting to wrench bikes or be around the bike scene or whatever, right?
Yeah, and interviewing with I don't know, I think he was probably in his 30s, but definitely 10 years younger than I am.
Right.
But once we started talking about bikes, he had nothing but.
Right.
He was just like, well, hell yeah.
Well, all right, bring it.
Let's do this.
Right.
And so I appreciate that guy really giving me the chance, because then I got to do something that I absolutely loved. It is the one job I have had that I have looked forward to going to every day without fail. Even though I didn't get paid very much, even though working retail means you lose a lot of your evenings and weekends and holidays. It was riding my bike to work. It was working with bikes and people who wanted to learn about bikes when I got there.
Just being part of that bike culture.
Yeah,
it's got to be
being
fun,
part of the culture.
Right, because you're these are my people.
The culture fed me.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
It fed my soul.
Right. So I think to me this sounds like the first time where you're searching, you finally make this decision. I got to do something I'm really passionate about, and you get yourself in this environment, and you feel maybe for the first time where it's like, wow, this feels good.
Yeah.
You don't have this thing like, I got to get out of bed to go to work.
Fantastic.
And whatever, and it's my job, it's my career, and it's a serious thing, and it's kind of a revelation for people that haven't had that experience. Because this maybe our educational sort of expectations or process, like we kind of mentioned at the top of the show, of talking about university life and education, but then the right education, like finding the right things to learn that really have an impact on your life. There's academics, but there's so many other things other than academics that really can pull you into the right situation to
give us an example.
Really turn your spirit on, man.
Like biking?
Like biking, yeah. Like biking, for me, it was, when I got out of school, it really was, my family was not connected to the corporate world, for example. So my dad was a school teacher, he ended up being a principal, and my mom was a nurse, and she ended up teaching and was a director of nursing stuff. So they were very successful in their careers, but they weren't business people. And so I just had an interest, even though I was interested in technology, and I've always been more of a scientist, interested in technology and sort of trends and stuff like that. But I was kind of curious about the corporate world, because I thought, it looks like people can make money and be successful. You know, I looked at the houses on our street. I remember this. Like, we lived in a nice house, but, you know, 8 houses down the street, their father was an engineer, and he worked for one of the corporations. And it's like, they always had like banging cars. You know, their house was nicer. You know, just like, that's interesting. You know, just a little data point along the way.
Yeah.
You know, so I was curious about finding out what that was, and that was a great education. Like working for a major, you know, global international company like General Motors, opened up the world in so many different ways to me in terms of just politics, how the real world works, how business works, and how enthusiastic, how like the lineage of General Motors, for example, like in the history of the country, like the industrial age, the 20th century. I mean, there's a lot of history. It's an old company. You know, that was pretty fascinating too, to see, you know, several generations of a family that's worked there. You know, like their grandson worked there, and his son worked there, and his son worked there. You know, so it was kind of all those things were just fascinating to me. So there's maybe some examples of things that, you know, you weren't taught in school, but make a huge impact on. Yes, this is an environment I like to be in, hang in. You know, some of the downsides for me, like working for a car company, was I was around a bunch of gearheads. Now, I like cars, I like driving cars and stuff, but at heart, I'm not the guy that wants to lift the hood and work on an engine and knows what the carburetor is and knows how to blow it out and do all these things. And, you know, there's a lot of guys, obviously, that work in the automotive industry that's what they love to do. You know, that's the enthusiasm part, like the bike scene that you found, you know what I mean? That's like, but I got to observe that. You know what I mean? So I realized, oh, that's not me, but I see the guys that is them, that they're in a cool spot.
Right.
You know what I mean? I didn't realize that really could be like that. So like I appreciated the people that were really enthusiastic about working for GM and that lineage and their families and stuff, but it wasn't me, you know, just so I ended up moving on, of course. But
yeah, I think the other part of staying in something like that is that, you know, that people say it jokingly, but say it so often that it's really not that much of a joke that you're, you know, working in a job that you don't like is what everybody does.
Well, right. There's, I think for a long time, I mean, maybe that's, and again, kind of where you're coming from or your culture or your family, maybe that's what was available to you, and it was a pretty good trade-off. Does put, you know, food on the table, and if you have kids and other things or health problems, it's like, yeah, I need this job, I need this health insurance, whatever it is. But it's not the only thing out there.
Right.
You know?
And those concerns were what eventually led me into the sort of big box bike world.
Right.
Which, you know, being concerned about having retirement,
right.
good health care.
Right. So at this point, you're in the retail environment. You're not making much money, but you love what you're doing.
Right.
And I should mention that, you know, she wasn't just a retail associate. Like all of a sudden you become the manager of the store, and people are working for you, you know, because, you know, you're a high level person that just like, you're just doing your normal thing. But obviously you people look at you and they realize, you know, she's a special person. She can handle these responsibilities, you know, maybe special,
I can handle the
maybe in special many ways, but, you know,
yeah.
So it's like, obviously, even though you're just like, hey man, I just want a job, all of a sudden you're like, you know, you're running the place and this happens and it kind of creates this,
managing a store.
Right. This, it ends up kind of asking this question again, though, is this really what I want to be doing? Because now you're throwing all these responsibilities on yourself.
Yeah. I'm in my, you know, mid 40s at this point.
Right.
And lifting, you know, 30-pound bikes over my head and, you know, holding bikes up for 150-pound, 200-pound people.
Right.
You know, how much longer?
Right,
and
when you're manager of the store, you got to do everything now. You know, you can't just rely on your workers, and if they don't show up, whatever, you got to really.
And I love the physicality of it, but the reality is how long can your body do that kind of stuff?
Right.
And, if you get hurt doing it, you don't have great health care. What's that going to do? So I started thinking about all those things and, you know, trying to solve that problem.
Right.
How could I continue to contribute to retirement account, have decent health care, blah, blah, blah. And so I ended up taking a job at it's a bike company that has retail stores and they do an online business. And
so it's a national retailer.
Right.
National bike retailer, you guys probably know. what a handful of companies are out there. You can mention it. I don't care if you might want to mention it.
No, I'm not going to mention
it.
Okay. So I worked for them as something called a web merchant, and I was sort of it was a position that they had created a year before I got there, so it wasn't, it was something that they figured out that they needed or thought that they needed, and it was essentially the liaison between merchandising, marketing, and IT. So, all the aspects of getting the online store working well for customers.
Right.
So just like, I managed a retail store, and the things you have to do there, making sure the environment works and product is good and, laid out well and people are knowledgeable about it who work for you and all that kind of stuff. So the same thing, there are substitutes for salespeople when you're working in an online store, and all that stuff has to still work really well in order for people to buy things. So my job just was kind of a mishmash. I learned a ton of things because I was interfacing with, the buyers and marketing people and the IT people.
And again, I think your skills and your high level capacity comes in handy because you're thrown into this now digital environment, right? And you're working with all these new sort of dashboards and screens and software programs you probably had never seen before, or touched before.
It reminded me in some ways of what it was like working in a high energy physics experiment, where your facility is located in the U.S., but you have collaborators all over the world.
Around the world, right?
Yeah, and it was so working in a big group like that, where so many people have a piece to do. And
managing the communications, but then working with all these new software technologies and trying to understand how they're all interrelated and connected and all this kind of stuff. And just the workflow of doing a completely different business, et cetera, right? Yeah. It's pretty wild. So at this point, obviously the digital world is starting to encroach on your, real world, let's say, experience, right? Up until this point, maybe you're obviously in physics, you're technical and you're working with experiments and, computers and oscilloscopes, and, obviously you're emailing and doing those kinds of things, but it's not a digital-based endeavor because it's the real-world stuff, right?
Right.
Like engineering is more real-world stuff, even though obviously the internet is coming closer and closer to it, So I think this is kind of interesting because I think this is, again, has helped inform your worldview and thinking like, where's my time? You're still searching for I thought I found my tribe, but I can't make the right amount of money. It's not quite the right equation yet.
Right.
So you go to this more corporate environment now, still with white people, but what happens there? So because you're still like, man, this isn't still quite right.
So then I was laid off.
Okay. Oh, so I didn't know that. I thought maybe you just left there. Okay, no. So you get laid off because they have their ups and downs. It's just the regular business world, and these things happen. And obviously, online retail it's this tsunami of just craziness happening right now.
Right. Yeah.
Would you go back to the company if they hired you back, or?
Well, I applied for a job there.
This goes back a couple years ago, right?
Yeah.
Now, but.
I didn't think they were. It was not going to be a good fit.
I see.
After I learned enough about it.
Okay.
I mean, I like working in the bike industry, but it's got to be the right thing before I do it again.
I got you.
Yeah.
So you had a couple other jobs after that was kind of in industry.
Yeah.
Right?
So I just started
because now you have this experience, right?
Right.
Of being in industry in a different way, Yeah. And so you probably feel more comfortable, and people look at you again differently because it's like, oh yeah, she can fit in here now. And so, what was that like in terms of, were you really turned on to work in industry? Because I remember you had this experience with this more startup company that was like, it seemed like it was kind of turn up for you.
Yeah. So, I'm still at this point trying to figure out, what it is. You've probably seen that Venn diagram, what the world needs, what you're good at, and what feeds your soul, and they overlap, and the thing in the middle is the thing that you're supposed to do.
You should go after, right?
Right. And so I'm still trying to figure that out because I do have a lot of interests, and and there are a lot of things that I could do, but what do I want to do for 10 hours a day that's going to
right.
not totally
right.
drain my
right.
interest in doing it again.
Right, kill your spirit. Kill your spirit or something.
Kill my spirit. So, so I tried a lot of things, and when you're first laid off, if you've ever had that experience, since I don't have any responsibilities besides myself and my dog,
right.
it's a little less intense maybe for
right.
me, but still I have to eat what I kill.
Right.
And I wasn't killing anything.
Right.
So,
right.
So you have that panic of like, once the unemployment is gone, then what do I do? And, it was at a time when unemployment was high, and it was not that easy to, people had been out of work for
So yeah, this is
years.
around the time of the mortgage crisis and you know, where things were really
I
not
couldn't
good in the
believe
economy.
how hard it was to find another job, and I haven't found another job. In fact,
well, that's the cool part of we're finally getting to this really interesting part is how you've really been able to, I think, redefine or reinvent, as we say on the Jim Jim's Reinvention Revolution podcast, yourself in really being able to see yourself in a different light. Now that you've kind of got these different skills and different experiences, but the world is catching up, I think, for a lot of us, and I think this is the cool part, that if we want to reinvent ourselves and have something to do on our own terms, or have a little business, or have a little consulting kind of practice, that these tools and the environment out there has changed so much that it's all available now. And I think you're starting to really see that, with these latest experiences you've had over the last couple of years, right? Yeah. And maybe this getting laid off thing has helped you really reassess, like, so frustrated. This is exactly what happened to me after I got, I was in the high tech world for a while. I took a couple jobs I didn't like. I quit one. I got laid off from one. And I took another one, and then I quit a second one. And I was so fed up, and I was really ready to not work again at all. I was just going to play gigs. That's it. I'll eat ramen noodles. I don't care anymore. But it really made me reassess of, like, how am I going to go about doing this? How do I find the right thing for myself? And it ended up being consulting for a while, which I've done for 10 years. And now I'm getting into this other digital world of podcasting and these other things. But I think you've had a similar experience here. So, you're in dire straits, but how did you get out of it? How did you start thinking, like, man, maybe I'll just get gigs or something? You found some people that you started talking to, right?
Right.
So you reached out, and you tell me about the experience with, I think it was Mary and these other folks that you started talking to.
Yeah, so I have a core group of friends who think differently,
right? And
which were the sort of foundation of what I'm going to call my tribe.
Right. Right. Finding your tribe. I think this is so important.
People who understand what it is that I have many people in my life who, were very concerned about me finding another job.
Right. Because that's maybe their own experience.
Their own experience.
This is how they think you need to be successful, or what has worked for them, or whatever.
Yes. And so, I know they were just trying to help.
Right.
But it was stressing me out, because it's like, I know I can do this stuff. I don't want to do this stuff.
Right. You've demonstrated, like, I can grasp anything I put my mind to.
Exactly.
I kind of end up rising to this high levels when I'm doing it, but it's still not fulfilling you, right?
Right. And yes, I needed to find a job. I have a mortgage, all that stuff.
Right.
But I also am able to control how and what I spend, so can plan for things and whatever. Anyway, I didn't want to just take another job, and so many people who were in my life just wanted that for me, and it was not what I wanted, and so the tribe finding was super important.
And so these folks were more independent kind of contractor people, or ran their own businesses?
Or they had done the reinvention thing already.
Okay.
They had been through this. And,
so they were ahead of you in maybe their thought process for themselves, right?
Yes. Yeah.
They're like, let me tell you how this goes.
Right. So I have a friend, a neighbor, who is quite a bit older than I am, and Well, not quite a bit if she's listening, but
whoops, sorry, Mary.
We're all young compared to the age of the universe. So
right,
there you go. Anyway, so while I was trying to figure out what to do, I decided to just ride my bike and think.
Right.
So I was, in a situation financially where I could do that for a year, where I could just sort of search and ride my bike and think and try and, look around.
That's a great meditation.
Figure out what's going on. Mm-hmm. And Mary, my neighbor a couple doors down, she knew this, and I had a big birthday and decided I'm going to do this ride across Colorado called Ride the Rockies, and she was having a big birthday also around that same time, and said, "Can I go with you?" So we packed up the car
wait a
and
second.
drove out to Colorado.
Hold on. This Mary went on this bike ride with you to Colorado?
She didn't ride, but she drove. We drove.
Okay.
So we were like Thelma and Louise.
I was going to say, this is Miss Amazing 2 or something. I missed this. Holy moly.
But she just wanted to go because of the trip,
Right.
We were camping across. It's an organized ride, and if you have a chance to do it, I highly recommend it. It's a fantastic ride.
Okay. What's it called again?
It's called Ride the Rockies.
Ride the Rockies. So they have a website or something?
They do.
RideTheRockies.com probably, something like that?
No, it's the Denver Post puts it on, I think. But,
a great event. I'll try to find the link and put it in the show notes. But go ahead.
Yeah, I loved it and would do it again in a second heartbeat. Okay. So when I described to her what I was going to be doing, she said, "That sounds like a great adventure. Can I go?" Right. And at first I wasn't sure because she's a little older.
Right.
Spending.
This is more of a rugged adventure, right?
Right, 2 weeks. The ride's supported, but I had chosen to camp to save a little money, and and we were going to be nonstop together for 2 weeks, and I wasn't nonstop together with anybody for that long because I'm super introverted and like my alone time, and so. We went, and the more I got to know Mary, the more I thought this woman has it figured out. So
this is cool. So in terms of like finding your tribe, it was this happenstance.
Yeah.
Of you found the right person to kind of start talking with or whatever, but then you spent this concentrated time with her.
Yeah.
Wow, that's really cool.
And so Mary is a fiber artist, a successful local fiber artist. Okay. And she still does some work, but is kind of tapering off and getting out of things. Right. She does all kinds of quilting and dyeing silk and making scarves, and I'm not doing her justice.
Does she have a website or anything that we should mention?
So SalomeSilk.com.
How do you spell that?
Salome, SalomeSilk. So SalomeSilk.
Okay.
.com.
Okay. Give her a little shout out there.
Yeah, and so she had done that, and then she also runs a daycare program at a local school as a way to have some, for many artists, I think, stable income source.
Sure.
So, the more we talked about a life like that, the more I realized. People actually do this.
They do.
And they own houses, and they have kids, and they lead lives similar to everyone else. And it's not the thing that I've always heard, the starving artist thing. No, you figure it out, and you get to do your thing for a lot of the time. Mm-hmm. And if you get really good at it, maybe you get to do your thing for even more of the time. So anyway. Mary was one person, and then so I started thinking about, what could I do to make a life that would be like that? And then I started working for a startup in Durham that was cycling and sustainable related. And in startups, they need people who can wear a lot of hats. And I learned a lot. I was hired.
Wouldn't be so pigeonholed and we're just looking for good bodies, good people with good brains, and
And so even though it wasn't an ideal experience, and in some ways it was a hard learning experience, I learned a lot about owning a business and running a company.
Right, because you really hadn't been in the business world per se so much.
Right.
So I remember we talked about it a little bit, like all the stuff you were discovering. I'm like, oh yeah, this is old hat. This is like my early days when I first started working for GM. Yeah. You're all of a sudden you're like, bam, this is how business works.
Yeah. So
you're thinking like, what? It really happens this way?
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah.
Yeah. So this was a startup, doing manufacturing and production and marketing and selling and customer service and
because it's a small business at this point, you get to see probably pretty close a lot of these facets.
Very up close, being responsible.
Right, you weren't like, well, that's the marketing department of 100 people and it's a different campus location or something,
Right, and and so thinking that all my past life is unconnected to this is not true. This is where research, the ability to figure out stuff comes in because you don't have decades to do this. It needs to be done now.
That's right. It's very time sensitive.
Right. So that was a very hard thing, hard place to work, but I learned a lot there and thought, if this can be done and done poorly in some cases, I'm sure I could do it maybe a little better. And so I started thinking about having my own business. What would I do that could, feed me enough that I could exist and continue to, do something creative.
Do something more on your own terms, where it's
on my own terms.
Yes, now, even though you still might make some compromises for time and money, etc. It's really on your own terms now.
Right.
And you can feel good about that. And, hey, if you can set aside certain time that I'm going to work this month or this season or these certain days a week or whatever to kind of structure it the way you need to structure it because, hey, I have to do an art opening here and I'm doing a Rondineer ride these 3 other weekends over the summer, right?
Yeah.
It really starts to pull a life together where you're like, wow, maybe this can really happen.
Yeah.
Right?
That is true.
That's cool. So, okay, so obviously you left there that one company, but you started, again, I mean, this is fascinating where all the sort of the educational part comes in and the reinvention part comes in, where it's like you're still kind of, searching for what's really going to be able to do this for you in terms of doing the income. Like now you're thinking like, your mindset has shifted and you're thinking, hey, maybe I could do something on my own. Have my own little business, but what is it going to be?
Right.
And you found accounting, it sounds like. This is your most recent thing that looks like this window's opening that, hey, I think this is real.
Right.
Right? I can do this.
So after working for this startup, I got connected with some other people. Durham has this Goolge Innovation Hub.
Okay.
There's a big tech startup and I guess just entrepreneurship community here.
Right.
So I met another one of my really inspirational friends, Reed Miller, who has Reed Miller Apparel, which is cycling clothing that doesn't look like cycling clothing.
Okay.
For women who've got things to do other than think about how good they look in the morning that you put on her stuff, and you don't have to think about that because you look good.
Right. I love it. So Reed, now you set up just to tell you what kind of person Maria is. You're going to connect us tomorrow, Reed and I, right? So we'll see if she wants to be on the program or not, but I'd love to talk to her because she sounds like a real interesting, inspirational person. Right. That really... She's
a totally different thinker than I am.
I see.
Or was.
Right.
And probably in the past I might have not paid attention.
Right.
But since I was looking for... I was becoming more open to everything.
Right.
Because this path that I had been told was the one that you follow that will get you to where you want to be, where you need to be.
Right.
That hadn't worked out. Right.
So I think what you said right there is really important, that now you are open.
Right.
Okay. So, and I've had these similar experiences where you see somebody or something or some business, whatever it is, and because you're so closed off and you're kind of going down this one channel in life, you really think like, oh, that's ridiculous, or you don't honor what that thing is, or you don't respect the value of something or someone's opinion or their experience because, what could they know? Because especially getting a PhD in something, in me, a graduate degree, in terms of like, I have a real expertise, so like, someone that's just still in high school, what can they tell me or whatever? Like you're really kind of closed off sometimes when you're interacting with people. But if you can really stay open and start hearing people and start seeing things that may have been so close to you before, but for whatever reason, you weren't looking at them.
You had blinders on.
You had the blinders on.
Yeah.
So that's great that you're able to recognize this now, which not everybody's able to make this switch. Like the switch doesn't go on for everybody, I don't think, or it goes on way late. Maybe when they're retired and starting to decompress and think about it.
Yeah.
And then their switch goes on.
Yeah, I think I said to you.
And then they're like, oh my God,
This,
right?
I really wish I had known some of this stuff when I
Right,
was 18.
right.
But
Right.
so Reed turned out to be just,
That's cool.
and she is still a great inspiration for the way that she thinks about things.
Awesome.
And business-wise, I mean, she's just very smart,
Right.
energetic,
Right.
open,
I gotcha.
but also discriminating.
Right.
So open and discriminating, I think, is really important.
Well, sure. You're right. You have to have a point of view,
Right,
that fits what
right.
you're trying to do, but staying open is important.
Yeah.
Important.
And she also rides bikes, so that's
So
a
you
big
connect
plus.
with her. That's cool.
And we talked a lot about finding your tribe. So Mary, had the tribe talk. Reed
Right.
had the tribe talk.
Right.
And another friend of mine who's I met when I was teaching at a private college in North Carolina through another friend, Daryl Coble. He works for a big delivery company.
Okay. All
but
right.
he's also a fantastic photographer.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Daryl Coble Photography in
I see.
Burlington, North Carolina.
Okay.
And Daryl is also been trying to figure this
the
out.
same thing out.
Figure
right?
the same thing out.
Mhm.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, especially for artists and just people that have really just kind of real skill sets. If you can find your niche, find your market, like we talked about markets a little bit, and plug yourself into those channels, the opportunities are really there, I think, to set yourself up in a professional way, to have your communication set up, like your websites and email and your outreach and all these things. It's really, really available at very low cost. So the cost of entry, cost of trying it, and the risk is low, very low these days, lower than it's probably ever been.
Well, I think that is true, depending on what kind of risk you feel comfortable with. Yeah.
Well, the risk of entry, like in terms of it doesn't cost you $50,000 to set this thing up. Okay,
Right.
It costs maybe
Right.
$500.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
1,000 or two, or like years
Yeah.
ago, to feel like that you're going to present something and put a shingle out and do something. It may have been a much larger endeavor. So I said, we're changing as individuals, but the environment, the landscape is changing. So, right at the same time. So we're changing, but the landscape is more accepting of someone that's doing this on their own now, right? Thinking they can get just as high level of service from an individual versus a larger corporate entity or something, for example, right? So, that's what's, I think, fascinating and so interesting, so dynamic right now.
Yeah.
So we have just a few minutes left. Let's talk about, exactly kind of what you're doing now.
Okay.
And what you see, kind of how you see it playing out, like the vision of where you think it's going to go. Because you said, okay, I can do this now. My mindset shifted. I got my tribe. But you decided I need this other little skill, and you found this thing, accounting, that
Right.
Hey, I'm not the most social person. That's not what you get off on, your energy or whatever. You like doing task oriented things and analysis and numbers, and it leans on your background in science.
Yeah, and it
and
was
technology,
pure accident
right?
the way I got into it,
And
because I started my own consulting company
Right.
2 years ago, and it's called Third Hand Group.
Okay.
With a 3, not spelled out.
Okay.
THIRD. Anyway,
So 3RD.
it's 3RD Hand Group.
Okay.
Yeah.
3RD
Yeah.
.com.
And
okay.
so my idea there was that with this big startup culture, there are people who don't need, companies who don't need to hire a full-time person to do something. They just need this one task done
Right.
well and fast,
Right.
and that describes what I do.
Right.
So I thought that's the value that I offer,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm perfectly fine doing that. I just got to figure out, the healthcare and retirement pieces, which I'm
Right.
sure I can do that.
Right.
And so once I set up the business, I started keeping my own books in Excel.
Right.
Took a couple classes from the local small business center in bookkeeping and accounting and taxes, to see how I needed to, what sort of business entity I needed to be, if it needed to evolve, blah, blah, blah. I got interested in bookkeeping and accounting, and I thought, I bet other people could use this. And in fact, I knew at the time that other people could use this.
Right.
So I thought, well, this might be my stable income stream, a source of, while I'm gigging.
Right.
So I decided to take some classes at the local community college and have online. So you don't have to drive there. You do it at your own pace.
Right.
Well, not your own pace, but when you have time.
Right.
And then that led to a part-time bookkeeping position, which is sort of my steady income stream now, while I am painting. So Friday, Saturdays, and Sundays are dedicated to working on my art business, and then the rest of the time I, do the consulting that I can, and then have this bookkeeping job.
Right. So to me, I mean, it sounds like, again, since you made this kind of shift in your mindset, I think you're really seeing the business opportunities in all these aspects now, maybe in a way that you never even imagined could really happen, because the more you start thinking this way, the more opportunities you see. And when people talk to you, like we talked about a little bit, like presenting yourself like, hey, this is my consulting practice, this is my bookkeeping practice, this is my art thing, they're like, wow, okay. Then it sets the right expectation. Now they know when they meet someone or they hear someone has a need, they can plug them into what you just described, and it just starts to kind of feed on itself. So I think you're just at the cusp of cool stuff that's going to happen.
Right. I feel like I'm at the beginning.
Yeah.
I'm not.
Yeah.
Don't have it figured out. But,
yeah.
But if I see light at the end of the tunnel.
Right. Well, that's the key, is that you just start doing it. The mindset is what's key. The mindset allows you to start doing it.
Right.
When you start doing it, you're able to see these opportunities as really start flowing. And like I said before, because you've had this experience of throwing yourself into different environments and being able to swim each time. I mean, you didn't really crater out and fail miserably, although that's a good learning experience too. But you have to have that confidence of, if I have to figure this out, I will figure it out.
Right.
Right. I'm
Yeah.
not saying you have to,
right.
But now that you're presented with these opportunities, I mean, like my kind of like joke to myself is when I, with my consulting, the work that I do, when someone asks me if I can do something, I just say yes. I don't even let them finish the sentence. I have no idea what they're going to ask me to do, but I just say yes. And then if I can't figure it out, or I can't sub the work out to someone else, so that's a little insider pro tip there, if everybody listening. Then I say like, oh, you know what? I'm too busy. I can't take the project on right now. But I don't tell them I can't do it, because I think I probably could. It's not something ridiculous. Like, if they ask me to do heart surgery, I'll be like, okay, that's out of my skill set. But anything that's, business or engineering or project management related or music related or whatever, I can source the right guys, put the right project together. And I know I can do it, usually better than most other people. That's the key of
and that's
me,
not,
right?
That's not arrogance. That's just fact.
No.
That's just,
I know it over years of experience. Right. I'm not saying this when I'm 24, okay?
Right.
Like, I just know that, like, hey, I know what other people have done. I see what they do, and I'm pretty confident I can get it done in the right time and the right efficiency. Like, there's other people that can do it, but they're going to make a lot of mistakes. They're not as experienced, etc. So, and I'm sure you're going to find the same thing. So I'm excited for you to keep this journey going. It's cool.
Thanks for being part of my tribe.
I love being part of your tribe. I really love it. And thank you for being here today on the podcast. Thanks for doing it. I really appreciate it. But we got to get out of here. So tell me one more time what your website is, or if people want to get in touch with you.
It's the number 3 rdhandgroup.com.
Okay. And there people will find maybe some of your artwork there? Or is it just a general website, or what's on the website? Because you do bookkeeping and accounting, and you're going to grow that practice,
right?
And you're doing art.
It'll probably evolve.
Okay.
So if you search Maria Falvo Durham,
okay.
that's probably the easiest.
And if you want to come down and ride bikes with her,
anytime.
she loves it.
Yeah.
So
you can stay in my Airbnb.
Oh, we didn't even talk about the Airbnb. There's so many things to talk about with you, right? So that's another thing that you just discovered and figured out on your own, and you've been renting out.
Well, sort of. A
right.
former boyfriend introduced me to that whole. He said,
concept.
"You ought to do this." And
okay.
I'm like, "Yeah, I ought to do this."
But it's just like there's so many little entrepreneurial opportunities that now your mindset is switched and you see it. So now you can just generate your own cash flow.
Right.
And I know that we're going to work on investing stuff together too, and that's going to help you too. And good things are happening. Anyways, got to get out of here. Hey, if you like listening to the, first of all, let me thank you again. Thank you so much. Okay. But if you like listening to the podcast, please go to JimJim's.com and find the podcast there, or you can go to facebook.com/JimJim's Reinvention Revolution podcast. Like it, share it, tell your friends about it so we can keep this thing rolling. Okay, thanks again. See you next time, everybody. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Jim Jim's Reinvention Revolution podcast. If you want to hear more, join our mailing list at JimJim's.ReinventionRevolution.com. See you next time, and remember, the revolution has just begun. So dig in, embrace the process of reinvention, and start realizing the success you've always dreamed of.